Bill, thank you so much for spending some time with me here this morning.
Glad to be here.
I wanted to reach out and talk with you. As the chairman of NAIOP, you've had the opportunity to travel to a number of different chapters and communities around the country. And I'm curious, talk with me a little bit about what you encountered in the various markets that you've visited over the last year.
Well, it's been a fascinating year, and I've actually been to 13 chapters so far, so 13 different markets, and I have 3 more to go. And it's been interesting. I would say it started in January, of course, and I think people were more optimistic, sadly, I'm afraid, in some degree throughout the spring, and we really had some sense of the markets returning during my visits. And then I would say during the summer, there'd been a little more of a malaise of saying that because of the election coming up, but primarily I think a lot of the developers are going through a little bit of a frustration now with their tenancy, and their tenants are having major concerns about the uncertainty here in Washington. Clearly, I think that's number one, and just where the economy is going to go. And so they're sort of lining up potential expansion opportunities, which can happen probably now, hopefully in 2013. But right now, things to be a little bit of frustration with a lot of the different markets things are on hold.
So in terms of follow-up, what are some of the common themes that you have found across the markets?
It's been interesting. I mean, I certainly think the regions that leverage their universities seem to be more successful over time. I think that's sort of a brand that areas can succeed on, and certainly parlay that into new job growth. And you can tell some of the regions that are looking backwards and those who are looking forward. And I think the other theme is energy has changed a lot in the last several years. Areas certainly in the Southwest and in my town of Pittsburgh, a lot has changed now with the new natural gas and how that's going to change the economy with manufacturing and actually making it cheaper in some degrees to have businesses here in the United States than it would be potentially in China and other countries. So that's an aspect. I think another theme that I've seen and witnessed, I should say, is the waterfronts and this is not just oceanfront. This can be riverfronts in different markets that really used to sort of eschew away from the water, and now in the last say 25, 30 years, they're realizing that people want to live along the water. They want to have bike paths, and they certainly want to have offices. And I think the real estate development community is looking at that as great opportunities. But it takes more than just the private sector. It's a public-private partnership, which I guess is another theme that I see is really the smart communities are the ones that are doing these public-private partnerships, and they're working together. And it's not just the government coming in saying we know what the city wants. It's working with the development community and realizing that between the two, the private and the public sector, they can probably work on a long-term strategic plan for the region. And you really get a sense that some regions have that strategic planning. They may not say it in that tactical manner, but they're really looking at it as an area where down the road they all are somewhat on the same page of where their region is going. And other chapters and other regions that I visited, you get a sense that there's multiple different answers of why I should locate. I always ask, why would I want to open my office in your town if I have 150 office employees? Why is it? And it's fascinating. I usually ask it to the NAIOP, the local chapter board, and it's a great barometer because some of them immediately articulate and the same answer, and then some have very different answers, and then some said, no, we've never really thought about it, which is stunning to me. So I think it's part of our NAIOP mission locally is to really try to work together on common themes to grow our particular in our local regions.
As a follow-up, one of the things that I'd like to ask you about is the alternative energy notion and shale. And where do you see that going, given the market that you're in?
Yeah, well, it is interesting because there's a lot of different schools of thought, and obviously there's an environmental concern aspect to it. I would say in Marcellus Shale, which runs basically between western upstate New York down through West Virginia and all through western Pennsylvania, all 3 states have taken a very different tact. I mean, West Virginia has decided to take on more of a taxing mode with it. Pennsylvania's been much more free-flowing, and no pun intended, but in the sense of really trying to encourage whatever they can to get that activity going and businesses. And New York has taken much more of a wait and see with the environmental concerns. Not necessarily. I mean, time will tell which is the right approach. So I'm not necessarily promoting one over the other. But the real issue we're seeing is independence for this country with regards to energy, and it's going to take a long time. This is not a 5-year plan. But more importantly, and there's a specific example that just came up in western Pennsylvania, that I just heard about was a glass factory. I'm just using that as an anecdotal case. That had 2 years away, they're going to move to China just because of cheaper labor. But because the energy, they use so much energy in with making glass and recycling the glass, that they actually had as feedstock, and they could make it cheaper in Western Pennsylvania. And there are several hundred jobs that were saved because of that. So that's the type of thing that's occurring. Not just Western Pennsylvania, Marcellus, it's also now in Ohio. We certainly have the Barnett, which has been gone for quite a while out in the Fort Worth, Dallas, North Texas area, and of course in North Dakota. So, and these are all sort of new economies in the sense that natural gas, we've known it's been there, but it's now basically 2,000–3,000 feet deep, and you're able to drill down not just vertically but laterally, and then you could break up, you fracture the rock, and then you bring it back up slowly. And I think it's, again, not just about natural gas, it's about the industry, the petrochemical industry now, and they're talking about in Pittsburgh, it's called a cracker plant. Shell is going to plan on building it. It's a $1.3 billion factory out in a place called Beaver. It's just outside of Pittsburgh. And it's 200–300 ultimate jobs, which isn't that stellar, of course, but what it's going to do is there's going to be a tremendous amount of plastic industries and companies. Even I heard perfume. There's all these different types of things that end up using this ethylene and ethane that come out of the natural gas process when they work through it. So there's a whole new opportunities for manufacturing in the United States, which I think is very exciting for our industrial activities with NAIOP.
So Bill, I'm curious about something. What type of retrofitting to cars or buildings or structures needs to occur in order for our country to make full use of the energy coming from the Marcellus Shale?
Well, with respect to natural gas, I think it's worth mentioning, it's not a perfect material for the environment, but it's twice as good as certainly traditional other fossil fuels. So I think it's a move in the right direction. Whether that's the long-term answer for the next 100 years, I can't comment. But what it's going to take, actually, it's a good question because we all have, or many communities around the country have natural gas in their homes for heating systems, and certainly you could tie that in. But it's complicated because, unfortunately or fortunately, you have to put compressors. Otherwise, it would take 7–8 hours to load your car up because it's a very low, slow flow. So there'd be some of that. But I think the main issue is going to be probably much more with trucks, long road, off-road trucks, on road trucks, I should say. As well, and then buses, which of course are happening in many cities. And reality is that traditionally these natural gas buses were doing it for the environment, but now it's actually cheaper. So it's going to take time. I did talk to someone in the trucking industry and said, many of these trucks, because they're working 22 hours a day, they're on the road, interstates all the time, that they have a fairly short life cycle. So the good news is instead of maybe retrofitting the trucks, it's just the next generation, which is of course coming up all the time, that those could be moved to natural gas. So then the question is that's great, but then they need to have fueling stations, and you need to have the places where trucks can stop along the highway. So it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg, and it's going to take some of the large companies, the Chesapeakes, who are already talking about this, and other natural gas companies and Range Resources, to probably spend a little money up front to promote that and to actually install those. And so it's a classic situation where they'll probably have very little usage for a few years. It'll be a loss leader, I guess would be the best term. But ultimately, we'll never get to that next level with the trucks without having that on a regular basis throughout all the interstate systems.
It seems to me that there's opportunity there for innovation and for a potentially new industry as we try to retrofit some of our existing infrastructure to accommodate this new source. So I think that's a wonderful thing. That's a very positive thing going forward.